Son, meet your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. It's a G1. Did you guess? Roll titles. Well, hi YouTube. Well, if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing this now. If you've been a Patreon subscriber, you'll have seen it 2 weeks ago. Yes, the new old camera, the newest acquisition for the fleet is this one. And there was a bit of a hint, if you noticed, there was a red body. Now that could have been the G1 or the G2, and I think maybe in the G3 came in red, I'm not too sure. But this camera was, there was a little hint of red, and one or two of you got it. A couple of you came very close with G1, with G2, but this is a G1. This is the granddaddy of all of the Micro Four Thirds cameras. It's fun. It is small, it's light, it's about 360 grams including the battery, a little bit more with the lens on, and I've got the 24mm f2.5 on it for the moment just to make it nice and small and neat, but that's not the lens it came with originally. So why have I got this? Well, it was cheap. It was less than £30 including the delivery. Two things prompted this. One, I made a comment on a video and I made a bit of a faux pas in it, which I do apologise for. It wasn't a deliberate error. What actually happened is that what I meant to say came out slightly the wrong way, and I said that the OM5 from Olympus was the first proper Micro Four Thirds camera, which of course it wasn't. It was the first of the Micro Four Thirds cameras which could be considered as a professional sort of camera, and the first one with IBIS and things in that professional body sort of thing. It was very much the leader in that, but it wasn't the first Micro Four Thirds commercial camera for sale. That goes to this one, and it's November, or it's just finished November 2022 as I'm speaking, and that camera came out 14 years ago in November 2008. Now, November 2008, it came out towards the end. Most of them started shipping about 2009, January 2009 I think. But it was actually shown properly in November 2008. And it was a revolution, it was a real revelation compared to what had been there. It was the world's first removable lens mirrorless camera. Now there'd been mirrorless cameras before this one, but they'd all been fixed lens. And also why it came on the scene when it did is the technology came on the scene at that time. Electronic viewfinders and the live viewfinders on the back really changed around about that time. There was a big upsurge in what was available. Now if you compare this to what was available from the other brands, you had things like for about £4,000, maybe £5,000 in the UK, and similar sort of figure in dollars, you had from Canon, their top of the range camera was the 1D Mark III. Maybe the 1D Mark II then, I'm not totally sure, I'd have to look, but I think it was a 1D3. 1D3 had 10 megapixels, and it was an APS-H sensor. It wasn't a full frame sensor, it was a 1:3 ratio. So it wasn't a full frame sensor on that. You also had the 5D Classic at that time, which I think, was it 8 megapixels or 10 or 12? It was round about that. It was, I don't think it was as much as 12. The 5D Mark II came out with 20 megapixels a little bit later. But basically they were standard SLR cameras, and although this is seen as a mirrorless DSLR, it was never actually called a DSLR because it doesn't have a pentaprism on the top, and that's what made it quite unique. In fact, these were based on the 4/3 sensor, which had been around for a while. Lumix had dabbled a little bit into photography. They hadn't really gone too much, but they did have a 4/3 sensor out. Olympus of course had the E range of 4/3 sensors out, and these cameras had the 4/3 sensor as well. The sensor's about the same sort of size. This one, 12.1 megapixel, wow. But the advantage of these, because it didn't have a mirror box and it didn't have a pentaprism on the top, inside there is effectively a little tiny TV screen, as you all know if you're modern photographers, but inside there is a little tiny TV screen and a flip-up flash, but basically it didn't have the mirror box, which meant that the lens could be a lot closer to the sensor, which meant you had smaller, neater lenses. You could buy, as an optional extra, an adapter to put the original 4/3 system lenses onto here, and they would work perfectly well. But the idea with Micro Four Thirds was you got smaller lenses, no mirror box, no pentaprism, so it wasn't really what was considered as a digital single lens reflex, because it wasn't really a reflex action camera, and Panasonic Lumix didn't actually market it as that. Now, a few little things, good and bad points. As I say, I've paid less than £30 for this, and why did I do that? Because it's a bit of fun, and as I say, I wanted to eat some humble pie for those people who put me right about the OM5. The EM5, I should say. EM5, I'll keep on saying OM5. The EM5 Mark 1, which I started my Micro Four Thirds shooting on, actually, one of those. It was also in red. There was a black one on there, but similar price, but I wanted something red, and one of the advantages red, it was available in red, dark blue and black, by the way. One of the advantages of the red is it looks a little bit toy-like. It works equally as well as the black one does. It's identical except for the colour. But it's a sort of thing you could take on holiday, and nobody's going to really bat an eyelid when they say it. It is quite stand-out-ish, but it doesn't look as if it's a pro camera. It's not going to attract all these people who might be interested in seeing it as being a pro camera, whether you're worried about it being stolen on holiday or whether you're doing a bit of street photography and you don't necessarily want to attract too much attention. Even though it's bright, people don't look at it as being a real camera, which is great for me. Good and bad points before I give you all the specs on it. Well, as I say, it's small, it's neat, but Lumix around about this time did this annoying thing. It was a shiny plastic. So what they did is coated it in a matte satin rubberized finish to give it a little bit of grip and feel, to give it a little bit more pizzazz, a little bit more luxury feeling. Well, that's fine. Unfortunately, in the temperate climate of the UK, it started to degrade. And what happened is, you can see it on this box, well, you might be able to see it on there, on this box. It becomes sticky, and it's a horrible coating on there, and you can actually scrape it off with your fingernail. It's a horrible, horrible coating. If you've had a child who's had boiled sweets and they've been touching door handles or touching a camera, it feels like that, and it's horrible. And you'll be able to see, if I'll put a little video up there, you can see into there. It sort of flakes off, this rubberized stuff. Now, what I've been doing since I got it is I've been trying to get rid of it with a little bit of rubbing alcohol and isopropyl alcohol and just general scraping with my fingernails just to get it to come off, and it is slowly coming off, and it's actually not too bad to hold now, but it's ruined cameras. It really has ruined the feel of these cameras, and this certainly went on for the G1, G2 and G3, I think. The grandfather bit, of course, 6 levels. Great grandfather to the G9. This really is the beginning of the heritage of my fabulous G9 there. The camera itself was quite world-beating in a lot of ways when it came out, because it had, even that time, a tilt swivel screen. I don't think I saw those on Canon cameras, tilt swivel screens, for about another 6 or 7 years. It was ridiculous. This is, you know, great, absolutely fantastic. The control layout is just about what you have on the standard sort of Lumix cameras today. That little 4 button with the center one for the menu. Top panel is straightforward. It has a switch on the top for your autofocus, whether it's continuous, manual or single. It is quite a big amount of land area taken up by that button. It could have been a nice small little switch, but never mind. On-off switch in the usual Lumix place just there, beside a proper mode dial with all your standard modes on like any camera had. Remember, this was actually quite a serious sort of camera. It was taken as a serious camera because it was a new edition, and it was leaving a lot of the competition behind because nobody else was doing mirrorless cameras for pros to shoot. This really was something special at the time. Lovely little thumb hold on there, and it makes it's actually quite a nice little camera to hold. Although it's small, it's not too bad. Switch there for your single shot, multi-shot and timer, 2 second or 10 second. And the interesting thing is, I'll just take the lens cap off on this because this shows some of the age. I tend to leave it in the multi-shot position, which I don't normally on most cameras. I tend to leave them in single shot because on the modern cameras, if you leave it on a multi-shot, you press the shutter release. Before you've had a chance to take your finger off, you've taken 6, 7, 8, 10 shots. Well, there's a 3-shot maximum on this, 3 shots per second. So if I'm actually doing something like this, let's see what I've got it on. I've got an AWP, I've got some good light there, so hopefully we should be able to hear the thing. And it's also very loud. Have a listen. Not so good. Not so good at all. I'll try pointing it at. In fact, what I'll do is I'll open up the aperture with a certain f8. So I'll open up the aperture a little bit, so to really get it to its maximum. That's an f2.5. Point towards the light. That's your lot. So that's what we get on motorised drive. So if I just want to take one shot, it's easy. It's not a problem. Switch it back off again. Little LED to show that it's on. Little green LED there, which is fabulous. 2 other switches on the top. You've got your Q menu, your quick menu, which is great. It gives you all what you normally get. But there's also a film mode, which is a bit of a waste of time button, to tell you the truth on this, because all it does is change the scene, so you can go to your monochrome, or you can go to the other types of scenes. There are those built into it. One of the things I do like, but it takes a bit of getting used to, is the finger dial. There's no thumb dial on the back. There's only the one dial. And if you are on manual, for instance, you can turn it. It'll change, say, your speed. To change your aperture, press the button in, and then the same dial does aperture. To get it back to speed, press it again. If you're on aperture priority, for instance, you'll change your aperture by pressing it in. You will then change your exposure compensation, and the same for shutter priority. So great little thing. Say built-in flash, it just pops up like that. On the back, you've got your live view and electronic viewfinder selection button there. On here, you've got your play button, a normal AFF lock, and just one function button right down the bottom there. Other than that, you've got your normal white balance, ISO, and metering modes there. And down the bottom, you've got your normal sort of recycling bin for playback. But it's also a preview button. So like a lot of other cameras, if you're shooting in aperture priority, you can press a preview button to see what it would be like for your depth of field. But one thing I've never seen on a camera before is if you press it in when you're on shutter priority, speed priority, it actually will show you what the effect of the speed is. So if you've got a slow shutter speed and some moving items in it, it'll show you the shutter blur. I've never seen it before. It's fabulous. Now this, again, as I say, was a revelation when it came out. The tilt swivel screen, the screen on the back is a massive 460,000 dots. Wow, we're now talking about sort of 5 million dots, 460,000 on this one. But it's not bad. It actually shows you really well. And if I can switch it on, I'll try and let you see what's on the back there. It is fairly straightforward. What you will notice, though, if you can see, I tend to have the grid lines on. And if I'm looking on my little G100 here, I've got some tiny little thin, almost hidden sort of lines which you can see for your grid markers. They really are very, very thin thread lines. This thing looks like prison bars. Massive. Absolutely massive. Now, since I got this, I haven't had a chance to do a great deal of photography with it. But I have managed to get it out a couple of times. It's been very, very foggy and very, very dark here in the UK. And that's pushed the camera to its limits a little bit. And I'll try and put some pictures on at the end for you to see. I haven't taken a great deal, but I'll try and put some pictures on at the end. The problem on this is noise, and we'll come to that in a few minutes. I'll tell you about it in a few moments when I start going through the specs. But apart from that, the camera's great. It's a wonderful thing. And the advantage is, of course, because it's Micro Four Thirds, you've got the choice of all the Micro Four Thirds lenses. And cameras are only as good as their glass. And if you've got good glass on the front of a camera, even an older design can give you some fantastic results. When it first came, it came with a 14 to 45 millimeter lens. You couldn't buy this in anything other than a kit form. It only came as a camera body and lens. You couldn't buy the body. And the reason for that was there wasn't any other lenses on the market. Lumix released 2 lenses with this, the 14 to 45, not the 14 to 42, 14 to 45 with Mega OIS on it, and also a bigger one, which I think it was a 45 to 150, I would have to double check up on that one, as an optional zoom lens, telephoto zoom lens for it. So you're fairly limited. So you could only buy this camera as a kit. So let's have a look at some of the specifications on the camera, because it's really going to point us down to the limitations, shall we say. When it was released in the UK, it was £499, $699 in the States. As I say, it's 12.11 effective megapixel size, which doesn't sound a great deal, but as I say, my top of the range Canon 1D Mark III of a similar sort of era, which was a real pro camera, it was a massive brick of a camera and beautifully made and used for incredible things, was only 10 megapixels. So don't let that put you off too much. We're now sitting, of course, at about 20 megapixels on the top of the range Olympus and Lumix film cameras, and up to about 24, I think, on the GH6. So although we've doubled the size almost, we haven't got a huge amount bigger. So don't let the megapixels put you off. Remember, if you're watching something like 4K TV, you could be watching on a set which is 72 inches in size. But 4K TV is only around about 8 megapixel. A high definition TV, a 1080, is about 2 megapixel. So you can see that's well beyond that. Most of the time, if you're putting stuff onto social media, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, you're probably talking somewhere around about 1,000 to 2,000 pixels wide. And if you consider that this one is 4,000 by 3,000 in its maximum definition, you've got an idea that you're still beyond what most social media will take. The problem that you have is you can't do much in the way of digital zooming and cropping on this, because you're going to lose some and it's going to get pixelated earlier. But you can do an awful lot. Don't let that put you off. It only shoots in 3 different aspect ratios though, which I found fascinating. It does 4:3, which is its native, of course, being a 4/3 camera. It does 3:2, which is your standard sort of APS-C and full frame camera ratio. And it also does 16:9, which is your high definition TV size. It doesn't do a 1:1, which I was quite taken aback by. And that was one of the clues I gave you, if you remember. So it was quite surprising on that. It does have autofocus, manual focus, face detection it's got, and AF tracking. Even on the very first one that came out, face detection and AF tracking, and it works extremely well for its age. Focusing areas though, just 23. We're now talking about 200, 300 or even thousands of focus points, 23. But that was actually more than most of the equivalent Canons. Again, as I say, I think I had something like 9 or 19. It was something like that on my 1D Mark III. So it wasn't a great deal. This was quite good at the time. It says here that its image stabilization is optical image stabilization. In other words, it doesn't have IBIS in it. And in fact, most of the Panasonic cameras, when they first came out, didn't have IBIS in. It was only a more recent sort of thing that Panasonic started doing IBIS. Olympus were the leaders in that. And of course, Olympus lenses, by and large, didn't have image stabilization in the lens. They had IBIS in the camera. Whereas Panasonic have almost always had image stabilization in the lenses. Not this one. I've got 24mm on. Of course, it doesn't have image stabilization. It being one of the primes, but as a wide angle, it's not too bad to use anyway. But most of the lenses, I tend to use my if I can find it here, I tend to use my 12 to 60 a lot of the time. That has built-in image stabilization, and even the little 12 to 32 pancake zoom, which I'm using on my G100 here, has IS in it. So you could stick that on the front of the camera and you've got image stabilization on there. Not ideal, but for the age of the camera, superb. Sensitivity. This is where it falls down. Now, the unusual thing is the native mode for this is ISO 100. Now, most Micro Four Thirds have a native of ISO 200. This one doesn't, it's ISO 100. And in extended mode, you can take it below that. The top ISO, 1600, 1600. It's minute. We've got them with 500,000, 512,000 ISO now. But this tops out at 1600, or in extended mode it will go to ISO 3200. Now the caveat on that is you'll see some pictures at the end where I've shot even at ISO 1000. In fact, today I took a photograph of my car on ISO 800. It was a dull day, as I say. It was foggy, which is an ideal sort of day to push the limits of the camera a bit. I got the exposure right, but even at ISO 800 you can see considerable grain, and that's where this camera really does fail. That's where the technology has been left behind. And we'll talk about Micro Four Thirds not having terrific dynamic range and being a bit on the noisy side, but this really is. And I think that would be the problem with this camera in the long run, but we'll come back to that. Metering modes, standard sort of metering modes, center weighted, multiple weighted and spot mode. Shutter speeds. Shutter speeds are 60 seconds, I should say, up to 1/4000th of a second. Now again, purely manual shutter on this. There isn't an electronic shutter mode on this one, so it's purely manual on this. Exposure steps in 1/3 or full stops, so same as any other camera really. The flash, as I say, has got a built-in flash, but the flash will sync, and it's got the full sort of standard Micro Four Thirds standard flash connectors on there, so you can use any of the modern flash guns for Micro Four Thirds for the TTL. The flash sync on this is 1/160th of a second, and again that can sound a little bit low compared to some of the sort of 1/320th or 1/400th of a second that you can get these days. But remember, again, in comparison to something like the 5D Mark II or the 1D Mark III or the 1DS Mark III, they were about the same sync speed as this, so it wasn't unusual in its day. It was up with the big boys. We have to take that into account when we look back. Various different white balance settings, the same as you get on anything else. All those sort of things. As I say, drive mode, you have single continuous 3 frames, which is high, or 2 frames, which is low. Well, really, yeah, it's hardly worth having the low speed on that. 3 different self timers. You've got a 2-second, a 10-second, or a 10-second with 3 images. Let's see, as I say, the viewfinder, the electronic viewfinder on this camera basically came about because of the fact that the technology had improved so much. Lumix hadn't really done much in the way of cameras before, so this was pretty much a blank sheet for them to get into the market. And the EVF on here, which does auto switch between the LVF and the EVF, as modern cameras do, has 1.44 million dots. So it's actually not too bad an EVF on there. The normal diopter control at the side, so you can get in nicely into focus. It's a colour LCD viewfinder. The LCD monitor, as I say, it's a 3-inch TFT monitor on the back of 460,000 dots, and it syncs at 60 frames per second. 100% frame coverage again, and why is that important? Because again, a lot of the DSLRs at the time didn't have 100% coverage on their viewfinder, because of course they used a little bit of that viewfinder to meter through, to use for the metering. So you lost that in what you could physically see on the back of it, through the viewfinder itself. So this gives you 100%, which its big competition didn't. USB 2 connectivity, but through its own special little socket. So it's not a USB 2 socket, or one of the micro USB or anything. This was its own proprietary little socket, but it was USB 2. It had a video out on the side, so if I open this little panel, you have video out through the USB cable as well, but also a mini HDMI connector. So you had a decent HDMI connector on there. One thing it doesn't have, unfortunately, is a mic input socket or headphone output sockets, which bit of a letdown, to be honest. But at the same time, it doesn't do video either. This is a pure still camera. There is no video on here whatsoever. If you waited a year and got the G2, that had video. It was the first one with video on, but it was 720p video on that one. It wasn't until later on. And I find that fascinating when you consider that Panasonic with the GH range, the GH5, 4, 5, 5 Mark II and the 6 really are the de facto standard for mirrorless cameras as video cameras. And even the G9 that I've got down there is an incredible video camera. It just seems so strange that Panasonic Lumix on their first camera didn't have video at all. So of course there's no need for a headphone or a microphone socket. Storage on this is again unusual what the other cameras had at the time. Most of the other cameras you had the larger cards that you had. This had SD cards. And because your file size is small, because of course you didn't have to have the speed for video and at 3 frames maximum a second, you didn't have to have the super write rates. Any old cards can be used in this. I've got an 8 gig card in there. And when I got this camera, For less than £30, I got the camera, I got the lens cap. I didn't get the lens, obviously. I got the original G1 strap, and I got 4 SD cards and 2 batteries. 2 batteries with it, both proper manufacturer Panasonic batteries, which I thought was absolutely superb quality, superb for that. Weight for it is, wait for it, the weight for it is, the camera body with the battery is 380 grams. And if you had a supplied lens, the 14 to 45mm, it would take it to 630 grams. So that was still considerably smaller and lighter than the competition from Canon and Nikon in those days for their normal DSLR cameras. So, what do we do with this camera? Well, first of all, I'm trying to clean it up. So if you've got one of these Lumix cameras, a G1, G2, whatever it is, with this horrible stickiness on, give me a hint as to how to get it off. It's just doing my head in. It really is doing my head in. But I managed to get around it. It's not too bad to hold now. I've got most of the stickiness off. The only problem is when the stickiness goes, it makes a very shiny, almost cheap plastic feel to it. But I can live with that. The battery just pops out. One thing on the firmware updates, after updating to version 1.3, you can only use the camera with properly authorized Panasonic batteries. So you could get a third-party battery as long as Panasonic had approved them and checked them over for that, because they'd communicate between them. Although I don't know of any other battery manufacturers who work to that standard. So basically, if you're going to buy one, buy Panasonic batteries. And I got 2 of them. The good thing is they're both fully charged. Oh, there was a charger as well with it. The charger came with it. These are both fully charged, and they seem to be working quite well. And that was one of the other criticisms of this at the time. You get about 360 shots out of a battery, whereas your DSLRs were getting double that. Well, you know, that was because you had an awful lot more electronics, an awful lot more displays in this, and that was seen as a big criticism of this in the day. Your current cameras now, your R series and your Z series from Canon and Nikon and your Sonys, don't do any better than this insofar as still shooting. And as I say, there's no video on that. So what's special about this? Why would I buy this? As I say, a bit of fun. Micro Four Thirds is fun. Could enjoy ourselves. But also the fact that for me, I've had so many people over the years have asked me, I want a camera. I just want to get into photography. I don't want to do anything professional, but I don't have much money to spend. Can I spend less than £100? And I've always had to say, no, you can't. Well, I've got to change my tune now. This camera, as I say, you can buy, and it wasn't the only one for that sort of price, about £30 on eBay without the lens, but with all the bits and pieces you need for it. 4 cards, 2 batteries, charger, strap. You can buy the 14 to 42 or the 14 to 45 if you can find one, but certainly buy the 14 to 42 Lumix lens, which is a superb little lens, for about £60 to £70. That makes it £90 to £100 for the lens and all the camera kit, perfectly able to be used. Now, you're not going to get the fastest response, but from the camera, you're not going to be able to push it to its limits like any of the new cameras. This is so old-fashioned. But the fact is, if you want to get into photography and you want to be able to get and use it properly, it's a great entryway into it. And you'll get your money back. Whatever you do, you'll get your money back selling them on again, because they've probably hit the bottom of the value anyway. But it's a great way to do it. The other thing, of course, as I say, if you go on holiday and you damage it or you lose it or it's stolen, you've got less than £100 investment that you're going to lose. And these are perfectly capable of going off and taking your holiday shots. Would I recommend it as an overall camera? No, I wouldn't. And the biggest reason for that is the noise. The noise is just incredible. You've got to have good light to get good photographs out of this. And if you've got poor light, you're going to be so disappointed if noise is a problem for you. Some people actually aren't bothered about noise so much. But it's not a pleasant noise. There are different sorts of noise which you can get in sensors. And this is not one of the most pleasant ones. Lots of sort of green and magenta blurges in them. So as an overall camera, no, it's not ideal. And there's an awful lot more has overtaken it. But as a bit of fun, I'm really looking forward to getting out and taking some. Now, as I said, I've taken some photographs, which I'm going to show you at the end. Not many. And I'll probably make a little video of later on than this, of photographs I've taken on it. So keep your eyes open for that, because I wanted more to get the unveiling and the review done before the photographs themselves got up. I have taken quite a few photographs to review with, but as I say, they're not the sort of things, they're more scientific photographs, if you like, insofar as I've taken photographs of black and white things in certain lights and car surfaces and all those sort of things which aren't interesting as photographs but do show you the limitations of the camera. So I'll try and take some proper photographs for you and upload those as another video. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Have you owned one of these cameras? Have you ever fancied owning one of these cameras? How did you get on with it? Did you guess it was this? Let me know about that underneath as well. But I'm interested in what you think about the thoughts on this camera itself. You know, it is old, it's 14 years old, but it's perfectly usable as a camera. If you're not a subscriber to the channel, why not? Please subscribe. You'll join the merry band. At the time I'm recording this, it's almost 6,900 people, but it's going out in a fortnight's time, so I'm hoping to be maybe over the 7,000 by then. And they're a great bunch of people online. If you're interested in becoming a patron of the channel and supporting the channel, there's two ways to support the channel financially. One is to give me a little PayPal donation. You can leave me give me enough for a cup of coffee on a PayPal link there, just here. And also, if you would like to support the channel in a bit of a better way, you could become a patron on my Patreon channel. And again, there's a link there. And the Patreon people have already seen this video. You see this sort of 2 weeks before you have, because they get access to exclusive videos, they get access to videos ahead of time, and they get a few little other benefits. And you'll see at the end of the video a list of the names of them, at least a list of the names at the time I'm making the video. So you'll see that they get thanked on that one. And I really do thank all those people for the support, because I couldn't do the channel without some of the people's financial support on it. But let me know what you think about it. Don't forget to give a big thumbs up, because the thumbs up really does help this channel to get spread further and wider. And let me know what you think about it. Till the next time, this is Brian James, Mit Camera, saying enjoy your photography, enjoy going out and taking snaps, and have fun whatever the camera is. Bye bye.